What is ROLLAC? And how does it fight corruption? This week on Dateline Abuja, the European Union ambassador and the head of delegation to Nigeria, Samuel Isopi, says the EU will provide 30 million euros for the Phase 2 program of the Rule of Law and Fight Against Corruption in Nigeria project. Now that's money we can't let just disappear. And I'm hoping my guest will give us some insight into the operations. Meanwhile, in our focus on the nation's capital, we'll take you to Phase 2 of the launch of this scheme. And as we do every week, we have a breakdown of the major stories from Nigeria's presidency. This is Dateline Abuja. Hello and welcome to Dateline Abuja. I am Kayla Megwa. Let's begin by bringing you an update of the major stories this week in Nigeria's presidency.
President Bola Tinubu has returned to Abuja from Berlin, Germany, where he had joined other world leaders in the G20 Compact with Africa CWA conference. President Tinubu was received on arrival by the Minister of the Federal Capital Territory, FCT, Chief Nyesom Wike, the National Chairman of the APC, Dr. Abdullahi Ganduje, and the Chief of Staff to the President, Femi Gbajabiamila. While in Germany, the president also held bilateral talks with German Chancellor Scholz and also attended the 10th German-Nigerian Business Forum in Berlin, where he assured German business community that with Nigeria's stable political landscape, foreign investment into the country are now very secured. A management team for the Auto School and Almajiri Commission will soon be constituted by the federal government. Vice President Kashim Shettima disclosed these at the National Children Leadership Conference held in Abuja. According to him, President Bola Tinubu is determined to address the challenge of out of school in the country and ensure every Nigerian child enjoys quality education.
Be rest assured that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu will promote, project, preserve, and promote the interests of the Nigerian child. In the months and years to come, the issue of out-of-school children will be frontally addressed. In the next couple of weeks, be rest assured that he will constitute the management team of the Almajiri and Out-of-School Children Commission in Nigeria.
The Senate has passed the 2024 to 2026 medium-term expenditure framework and fiscal strategy paper with a borrowing plan of 7.8 trillion naira for 2024, 9 trillion naira deficit, 16.9 trillion naira revenue, and total expenditure of 26 trillion naira. The President of the Senate, Senator Godswill Akpabio, announced an approval following the presentation of the report by Senate Joint Committee on Finance. The Senate also resolved that all items locally produced should be outrightly banned from importation.
In the light of the findings, the benchmark oil price of USD 73.96 and 73.76 and $69.9 per barrel be approved for 2024, 2025, and 2026 respectively. That the daily crude oil production of 1.78 million barrels per day, 1.80 million barrels per day, and 1.81 million barrels per day for 2024, 2025, and 2026, respectively, be approved, subject to NNPCL's confirmation of actual and verifiable deliveries. Those in support of recommendation 2 say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it.
The House of Representatives is raising alarm over the remitter platform through which the Treasury single account of the federal government is operated. The House, through a motion by Honorable Jeremiah Umaru, says trillions of naira have been passed through the remitter platform, and these monies are unaccounted for due to the proliferation of sub-accounts by the CBN. Meanwhile, the House is urging the Federal Ministry of Communication and Digital Economy to intervene, halt and reverse the increase in the tariff by the multi-choice group.
These unacceptable and arbitrary increments by the multi-choice Nigerians represented the second price hikes within the last 6 months, and the first one is 1st of May 2023, and the second one is 6th of November 2023, coming amid the prevailing economic hardship and excruciating poverty in the country. Mr. Speaker, the House resolved that urge the Federal Ministry of Communications and Digital Economy to intervene, halt and reverse the increments in DSTV and GoTV tariff by the multi-choice groups.
The House of Representatives Committee on Finance has resolved to place the National Lottery Commission on status inquiry and will be inviting all external auditors to audit the accounts of the Commission from the first day of its establishment. The resolution was reached during the hearing on the MTAF and FSP when lawmakers queried the spending of the Commission running into deficits.
You earn 6.3 billion in 2022. And at the end of the year, you ran a deficit of 252 million.
252 million carried forward.
Deficit.
A deficit.
How?
Yes, I did say that we had a carried forward of liabilities.
You generated 2.5 billion and you spent the 2.5 billion to the cover.
We are guided by the Act establishing the agency. If you look at Section 40 of the Act, establishing the agency, we are required to take a custody of a certain percentage.
Which Act are you talking about? The Constitution is supreme, isn't it, than any act of the National Assembly. When you are fully funded, you are expected to remit your IGR 100%.
A coordinated pushback on the advocacy for gender equality across the world and Africa in particular is on the way, says the United Nations, and as the world begins 16 days of advocacy, calls have been made to strengthen global and regional advocacy, coalition building, and transformative feminist action to end violence against women. The United Nations Women Country Representative, Beatrice Ayong, made the call in Abuja at a consultation with women's rights organizations across Africa.
Today, while we must pause to appreciate this progress, we must recall that we have neither significantly changed the composition of peace tables nor the impunity enjoyed by those who commit atrocities against women and girls. In fact, the 16 days campaign of activism to end violence against women should not only be a celebration, but a wake-up call in a context of gender equality pushback around the world, particularly in West, Central Africa, East, and Southern Africa.
Welcome back. The European Union ambassador and head of delegation to Nigeria, Samuela Isopi, says the EU will provide 30 million euros for the Phase 2 program of the Rule of Law and Fight Against Corruption in Nigeria project. The program, which is implemented by the International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance, funded by the EU, is aimed at promoting respect for human rights, ensuring inclusivity for all Nigerians, and reducing gender-based violence. Ms. Isopi was speaking at the official launch of the project in Abuja. Please watch this. The Rule of Law and Anti-Corruption Program in Nigeria, ROLLAC, is funded by the European Union with the objective of consolidating on the rule of law, combating corruption, and addressing gender-based violence while promoting human rights and inclusivity. Experts drawn from different sectors have converged here for the launch of the Phase 2 of the scheme.
Very much. Thank you.
According to the EU, over 1.5 million Nigerians benefited from the first phase of the project. It also gives reasons why it is throwing its weight behind curbing corruption in the country, adding that 30 million euros will be spent in this second phase, which will run for 4 years.
Fight against corruption is an essential part of this effort. Let me explain why the European Union is engaged in supporting Nigeria's fight against corruption. Corruption is a challenge in Nigeria and indeed in many countries of the world, as it undermines good governance and human rights and contributes to poverty. It is proven that corruption undermines the foundation of democratic institutions and represents a major barrier to social and economic growth. Corruption weakens the trust of citizens in democratic institutions and indeed can threaten stability. Corruption varies in nature and extent, but it affects all countries. The fight against corruption is therefore a fundamental part of the EU agenda, internally and externally, and is a priority in our engagement with partner countries. The European Union has supported Nigeria's anti-corruption effort since 2005, contributing a total of 88 million euros through 3 successive and successful programs. These programs have been locally driven and aimed at strengthening evidence-based policy making and people-oriented service delivery. They also aimed at creating a culture of transparency and a culture of accountability. They have supported civil society, and please, a round of applause for the civil society, to enhance its role as watchdog, providing the skills that will help to hold the government to account and to ensure that corruption does not remain business as usual.
This second phase, according to the federal government, aligns with the blueprint of President Bola Tinubu's agenda for economic recovery and drive sustainable growth.
The intervention aligns with the National Development Plan 2021 to 2025, the blueprint for Nigeria's economic recovery, conceived to create strong and sustainable governance structures and efficient institutions that promote citizens' protection. In the same way, ROLLAC Phase 2 is expected to drive productivity for sustainable growth in line with the renewed hope agenda of the current administration. It is therefore heartwarming to know that ROLLAC Phase 2 identifies with the vision of the National Development Plan 2021 to 2025 for promotion of full participation of women in the economy as a strategy to substantially improve socio-economic indicators such as GDP growth, employment generation, and poverty reduction. Enhance performance of the criminal justice system and justice service delivery, increase transparency and accountability of anti-corruption systems and reforms in Nigeria is required for equity and robust participation of economic agents in all sectors of the economy.
We said earlier, the program has a budget of 24 billion naira and will be spent across 6 states, Plateau, Kano, Adamawa in the north, and then in the south we have Anambra, Edo, and Lagos states. The budget is supposed to be spent on those states. But what we try to do is to ensure that whatever successes that we recorded in these 6 states, that we should be able to help other states to replicate, pick very specific things. It's possible a state like Zamfara will say they need us to help them with the sexual assault and referral center or for some training for police prosecutors. Those are things we can look at on a case-by-case basis and then support them to do those type of things. And like we said, this program is very important to us in Nigeria. Rule of law and anti-corruption. Our democratic development will not succeed if there is no rule of law. Our quest to eradicate poverty may not succeed if there is corruption. You understand? And of course, our citizens will not be able to realize their potentials if their rights are not respected, if they don't have access to justice. It breeds impunity, and also it can lead to people taking laws into their hands. So those are some of the things that we want to see addressed in the course of this program over the course of 5 years.
As the International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance, International IDEA gets ready to begin implementation of the ROLLAC Phase 2 program for the next 4 years. Many expect that the 30 million euros earmarked for the project will be used judiciously to improve access to justice for the vulnerable, persons with disabilities, and increased transparency and accountability of anti-corruption reforms. My guest on the program is Mr. Danladi Danladi, Head of Programs Nigeria for the International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance. Who are they? What do they do? Who benefited from Phase 1 of this program, and who is Phase 2 going to cater to? Who checks their spending, and what should we expect with this 30 million euro investment? Mr. Danladi, welcome to Dateline Abuja.
Thank you for having me.
So let's understand how ROLLAC works. How do you fight corruption?
Well, let me start from what ROLLAC means. ROLLAC is Rule of Law and Anti-Corruption Program. It's an EU-funded program. And basically, what we are set out to do is to support the Nigerian government, support the Nigerian people, in their effort to deepen rule of law and also to fight corruption. So our work essentially is to support the effort of government, support the effort of civil society organizations, whether in terms of equipment or in terms of training, capacity building, and advocacy, or in terms of developing policies and practices that can be replicated across board. So basically, in short, that's what we are supposed to do. We don't go out into the field to investigate or to arrest or to prosecute, no.
But you work in tandem with anti-corruption agencies of Nigeria.
Exactly.
So they hire you to do some particular kinds of work for them? Is that what this is? Because I know that in the war against corruption, there are different facets to it. So is it that they give some of those responsibilities to ROLLAC? Is that what you're telling us?
Okay, let me put it this way. EU is funding this project. And basically what they have asked us to do is to look at what are the key gaps in terms of Nigeria's effort to fight corruption. By the way, the program is not just on anti-corruption work, but there is an access to justice and rule of law element to it. So what we do is to work with those that are doing the work. So the anti-corruption agencies, the prosecutors, the courts. What are those gaps in your effort to fight corruption?
Talk to us a bit about this money. What's it used for? And how do we measure accountability on the part of your organization?
Perhaps let me start from the beginning. So you have 30 million as the budget for the program. And you have locations where this program is going to be implemented. So it's not just at the federal level. So we have about 5 initial states. In the south, we have Lagos, Edo, and Anambra. In the north, we have Kano and Adamawa states. And hopefully, we'll be adding Plateau to cover the north central. And then we have the federal level. Now, we have a program document that is called the Description of Action. It basically states the scope of work that we're supposed to do. And it also has what we call a log frame, indicators of success. How do we know that this program is successful, okay, in terms of impact? So for instance, one of the ways they would want to measure the success of the program is how many convictions have been secured between the time we started and end. So assuming the EFCC annually, their conviction rate is 500 persons convicted, okay? They would want to see that there is an increase in that conviction rate by the end of the program. So it's one way, of measuring the success. Another way of measuring success at a much more global level is to see whether Nigeria's ranking in global indexes has improved. At the moment, if you look at Transparency International Index, we're a bit low. We are actually low. In terms of rule of law, if you look at the index of the World Justice Project Rule of Law Index, we are low in terms of rule of law measurement compared to other countries. So that is also one of the ways that they will measure whether we are successful or not.
Could you run us through some of the achievements of phase 1 of this ROLLAC program?
Okay, some of the things that we did under phase 1 was to support the development of policies and legislation.
Such as?
Such as the administration of criminal justice law for some of the states that we worked with, like Adamawa and Kano, for instance, under the criminal justice component of the previous program, phase 1. On access to justice, some of the laws that we supported were the violence against persons prohibition laws of states, Adamawa, for instance, Anambra, Edo, child protection law for Kano and Adamawa, for instance. In terms of, at the federal level, the Police Act, that was one area that we supported too. The Nigerian Correctional Services Act, the Persons with Disabilities Discrimination Prohibition Law. Those are some of the legislation that we help in supporting. On the area of anti-corruption, the POCA law, Process of Crime Act, the Money Laundering Prohibition Law, Nigerian Financial Agencies Act. That was one of the laws that we also support.
Is there some kind of way that people have no choice but to adhere to whatever suggestions your organization may have made?
Well, Nigeria is a sovereign nation. There are suggestions that you can make, and some of them may want to take that, and some may not want to. Typical example, even though I won't mention the state, we supported the development of an anti-corruption strategy for the state. And the AG of the state was, we don't need this. Even though in some states, they said, really, they need this, and they want to use that to start, supporting the fight against corruption. So there are situations where you find some agencies say, no, we don't want this. And that is why I mentioned that from the beginning, each year, we work with them to agree on activities that we want to implement. And in many cases, once we have that agreement, we go ahead to implement those activities.
Apart from these situations that you just mentioned, are there other challenges with ROLLAC's work?
Yeah, there are challenges with our work. Typical example is that you train people to carry out certain functions in their respective agencies. And then by the next day you come, the person has been transferred to another location and to do a task that the training is not meant for. Some of the other challenges that we have is that you find it difficult to convince political leaders. I think that's one of the main challenges. Political leaders to see justice as important as some of the physical things they do, like road construction. It will be easy for a governor or the commissioner, to go and talk to people.
Well, that's because his performance is measured in many ways by things people can see.
Exactly.
So it's difficult for me to convince my people as a politician that, oh, look, this intangible thing is very important.
Exactly. And that is where we have the biggest challenge, that they don't tend to see some of these intangible things as important as the tangible things that people see. Access to justice is very important for people to realize their potentials. You need to, ensure that they have access to justice. There is rule of law that is obeyed. Otherwise, you have the level of impunity increases. People take laws into their hands, which will, in fact, impact on even the physical things that you're trying to do. You may build your roads and your schools, and people may not even use that, because there is insecurity, which is also an aspect of access to justice. For me, really, is that when we have support from donor agencies, let's make the best use of it. The example I gave you about people being trained and not using their skills, the donor would not want to spend their money if they see that is what is happening. So as much money as we get, let's make the best use of it.
Well, Mr. Danladi, I want to thank you very much for making out the time to be with us on Dateline Abuja.
Thank you,
and
Kela.
Good luck with all the work you have ahead of you. How many years is this project
5
for?
years.
5 years.
Yes.
We'll be checking up on you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks to my guest and to everyone who spoke to us today on the program. Our feedback mechanism is open, and we would love to hear from you on the corruption problem in Nigeria, your thoughts on the rule of law and anti-corruption program in the country. And if you're a beneficiary, let us know how using the social media handles showing right now on your screen. Thank you so much for watching. I am Kayla Megwa. See you next time.